From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to You Should Know. I'm your host, Evelyn Ledbetter, and today I have the pleasure of having Oscar Robinson. And Oscar has done many things in our community. He is retired from the university as the Director of Human Resources or Personnel, served as a council member in Portales for many years, and very, very community-minded. So, Oscar, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
I've wanted to do this interview with you for a long time, so I'm excited to finally get to do this.
Okay.
Tell me, let's start off before we dig into, we're actually going to talk about Buffalo Soldier Hill today, but I want to know a little bit about you, about your background and where you grew up and your family and anything you'd like to share or more fun, maybe something you don't want to share.
No.
No.
Well, uh, I call myself a Texhomian because
Okay.
I was born in Dallas and I lived there for 14 years. And my grandmother and I, uh, we transit back and forth across the Red River. And but I spend my later years in junior high school through high school in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and I finished college at Langston University in Oklahoma. And the so because I crossed the Red River back and forth, the family story is my mother had me do a childbirth in Oklahoma, but she told my grandmother, who was her not her mother, that she didn't want none of her. She wouldn't want her child born in this godforsaken state. So
Oh,
she gets on the Frisco train in labor to make sure that her child would be born in Texas.
so you were a Texan.
Yeah, so that made me a Texan. So that's why I call myself a Texhomian.
Okay, a little bit of both. And there's
Right.
actually, I think, a city that's
There's a lake there called
right,
Texhoma,
right.
and that's where I want to rest because my mom, she went back and forth. She just wasn't going to let her child be born in Oklahoma. And unfortunately, her child ended up getting educated in Oklahoma.
You know, when I was doing some research on this interview, I would have never guessed that you were born. Can I tell the year?
Yeah, I'm
That you were
proud of
born
my
in
year.
that you were born in 1940. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, I'm born 1940, September the 5th. Uh, but a lot of things happened in the 40s, we was in the World War. I was a baby when it was already 1 year into, and the United States wasn't in the war, and I guess maybe, and I remember recall my uncles being drafted to go to fight, and one went to Europe and the other went to the Pacific Islands. And I remember them leaving the house and my grandmother and and I think I was about 3 or 4 years old when they went off to war, and I recall that part of my life,
Mm.
and we cried because our uncle was going to fight, and we didn't want him to go, but they had to go, and 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 that was 40 being born in 40 were very unique years in this country.
You've seen a lot.
Yeah, well, every 10 years something happened.
There's been a lot of changes in the things you grew up through the 50s and 60s and
Right.
all kinds of
For
all
example,
kinds of changes in this country.
Jackie Robinson, uh, we was sitting around a tree in Dallas. I was 7 years old, and all of the men in the neighborhood around this cul-de-sac we lived, they had goats and had beer, and they was having a picnic outing, and all of the men in the neighborhood was sitting around the tree, and the boys, we was playing softball, and only to hear on the radio Jackie Robinson going to bat. We didn't know that was history.
Sure.
All we know is an action that here was this young black man
Right.
going to get to play baseball, and we sit there and we uh, watched him, heard
You
him,
heard him.
heard him come to bat, and they called his name, Jackie Robinson. And I'm a Robinson, so I jumped up and said, "That's my cousin."
Isn't that amazing that You actually were listening to the game
Yeah,
when history was
yeah,
being
when history but, you don't know about that, it's like CPR.
Mhm.
If you have a heart attack, you administer CPR, and so history to me is like CPR, and it happens, and then you just act.
And then
But I didn't know it was history,
sure.
and it's 47, 1947, I remember, uh, listening to my grandmother and them, talking to her. She loved news, and her favorite newscaster was a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Heber, and he was and at 6 o'clock, we had to sit and listen to the news, and Gabriel got up and said, "Earl Reaver has been appointed by President Truman to the Housing Commission. He's over the urban first
Wow.
Afro-American to be named on the cabinet of a president was Earl but we heard that through Gabriel Heber, and so news became very important to me
Sure.
in my house. We had to listen to the news. So that's how I got involved with my process of
Okay.
history because my grandmother, she loved the news.
Well, and then we were lucky enough to have you, come to Portales for a job here at Eastern, and you've been here ever since.
Yeah, that's a strange Dr. Bob Matheny. I
Good
love
man.
him. I love him. And Sandra, his wife.
Mhm.
Uh,
His
Doc,
his mom lived next door to
yeah,
us,
yeah, and yeah,
Elsie.
Elsie, and she lived and she was one of my supporters, and she encouraged me to run for city council too. And the uh, the Martinez uh, was at dinner, and Bob asked me. I can call him Bob now. Bob asked me, "Oh, how long you think you'll stay here?" I said, "Dr. Matheny, I'm on my way to Okmulgee. This is 8 hours away from Portales." And I said, "I'll give you 5 years." That was in 1985. Well, I'm still here.
You're still here. Well
So that 5 years has been extended every 5 years. It's
well,
been
that's the
extended.
year I started, college here at Eastern was 1985.
Yeah. And
So, well, we better dig into
okay.
the history part of this. How did you become involved in well, you said that history has always been apart from your
Yeah.
grandmother. So what brought you to starting to study about Buffalo soldiers?
I'm glad you asked that question. It actually started because everyone know I love to go to coffee shops. And go down to Daylight Donut. That's my favorite place to go in early in the morning,
Mhm.
and all of the guys, the meet down there, and nothing intended, but I call all my redneck friends. We always meet,
Uh-huh.
and we meet at the coffee shop, and all kinds of discussion
Okay.
happen. And because at that time I was a new person in town in 1985, I think it was Mr. Jeffrey, bless his soul, he's dead now. But Mr. Jeffries, Mary Jeffrey was his name, and he said, "Oscar." I said, "What?" He said, "You know what? I graduated from Nigger Hill High School."
Oh,
And I said, "You did what?" The same way you reacted, the way I reacted. And I said, "You graduated from what?" He said, "Oh," and he was very proud, raised his chest up to me and said, "I graduated from Nigger Hill High School, and we have a Nigger Hill out here." And I said, "You do?" And I said, "Wow." He said, "Yes." But I used that example to say that it wasn't being derogatory.
that's just what it had
That's
always
just what it
been.
was.
That's what
Just
it had
like
always
history, ignorance is bliss. My grandmother always told me, you can be happy if you don't know nothing. And sometimes you know something, that's when you get trouble.
the intent wasn't there
It
to
wasn't,
be
he
ugly.
wasn't, he wasn't being derogatory.
Well, tell me what were the Buffalo soldiers?
Well, the Buffalo Soldiers were President Lincoln military that fought in the World War in the Civil War. Out of the famed Massachusetts 54, the 54th Infantry out of Massachusetts is the father and the first Buffalo soldier. They weren't called Buffalo Soldiers. It's called Colored Soldiers. Colored Soldier Military Well, you got 15 the war is over with, in
Mhm.
1866,
Right.
and you got 15,000 black men with guns. And, you gotta think about that time. John Brown just wanted to fight the United States himself, and you didn't want these people joining in with the abolitionist movement with guns, because now the abolitionists would have guns.
Mhm.
So you have a civil war within a city. So the Secretary of Defense was commissioned by, President Lincoln to, do something with those 15,000 black guys with guns. And because he remembered Frederick Douglass coming to his office and saying, "Mr. President, uh, let our people fight. Let us fight for our freedom." So that's what President Lincoln did. He made the decision to militarize black men to fight in the Civil War. Hopefully, that would give them a mechanical or a technical advantage to have
Mhm.
more people. And so that that 54th Infantry, colored soldiers, as they were called, uh, is the is the father and mother of the Buffalo Soldiers. So that when the war was over, that 15,000 people were walking around with guns. And you already done, and we put them in the military.
Mhm.
Now what are you going to do with them? You're going to discharge them? And so no, they didn't want to discharge them, and they didn't want to get discharged because they was getting $13 a month.
Which
It was a lot of money.
that's a lot of money in
That
1866.
1866, you get
That's
$13 a month
huge.
and food and place to live and all that. So those soldiers didn't want to give up that $13 a month. And so then the war secretary said, "Well, we go west, young man, go west." Well, we got all these people going west, and we got all those people on the west don't want them out there, the Native American, because now we're invading.
Th
We
their
United
space.
States is invading their space.
Right.
So they had to. So the Buffalo Soldiers was another type of a military exercise to protect the settlers. And the sad thing about that, the settlers didn't want the black men protecting them. And that's always funny. They were sent out there to protect the people. They didn't want,
And
didn't
they
want
didn't want them.
they didn't want them to.
Well, and there were several forts. I mean, they served all across
All,
the
all,
US, but several in Texas,
and
all over the Llano
Oklahoma,
Estacado, right, Oklahoma.
Fort Steele,
Mhm.
Fort Hood still. Fort Hood today is still the home of the Buffalo Soldiers
Right.
in Texas. And
I've been
then
there.
Fort Leavenworth is still the the big home for the 10th Cavalry. That's where,
The 9th and 10th were typically the Buffalo Soldiers
yeah,
served in
the
there.
9th and 10th and the 24th and 25th
Right.
Infantry.
And they weren't given the best of duties, were they?
No, well, they was given everything that the white boys didn't want to take care of. And I mean, it's not mean just saying this. This is what the
This
right
is history.
that's history, and the readers uh, find that if you read the history of the Afro American soldier in the United States, you probably get disgusted in the United States. But if you read it for what it is, then you probably love the United States because here's a men that was willing to die for this country, but yet
Right.
they was treated really bad.
And the flip, I have a lot of Native American heritage,
Uh,
and so the sad thing is
and
the
then they was
displacement
put out
there.
here to kill Native Americans,
Right.
and the Native Americans, the Ute tribe in Colorado, named the Buffalo Soldier Buffalo. Because Afro Americans have nappy hair, kinky hair, and they have flat nose, and see my hair is like nappy, and so that kinky nose, flat nose, dark skin, and
Mhm.
then that looked like a buffalo. So the Native American always deal things, like they rave people like running bear.
Right. Your
Uh,
characteristics
yeah,
at
character
warrior day.
of the animal that they admire, they love, and they really admired the buffalo because the buffalo fed them, and the buffalo also was a force not to be reckoned with.
So that wasn't derogatory
It
in
wasn't
their
derogatory.
mind at
A
all.
lot of people, oh, they just call it because they look. I said, no, you got to understand. Native American ain't gonna name you a crow or a bear or a lion or a fox or a wolf child or a bird child if they didn't like you. And so they feared those soldiers because they looked different
Mm,
than anything else that they was
right.
fighting. And so the Buffalo Soldiers and the Native Americans fought against each other, but they had another kind of
A,
connection,
a mutual respect for each
right?
other.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of books that you a lot of this information comes from. So I'd like to.
Well, your original question about how I got involved, the Roosevelt County History and Heritage book, on page 22 and page 23, there's an account of Buffalo Soldiers and how they were in this county.
Okay.
And you get an index on that book, and those 2 pages were dedicated to that.
And then this one.
And this book here, Buffalo Soldier Treasure 1877, is a research on this account in this book. So Dr. Carson, Paul Carson, at Texas Tech, uh, and his students did a research on this story in Roosevelt County.
And both of these books are in the Portales Library. And I
Yes,
know I actually started reading part of this one that
right.
was online
Right.
and doing
Yeah,
that.
you can get this at the library. And I sometimes think this is my book, but the librarian said, no, I
It's
think
not yours.
it's not mine.
Well, Oscar, we don't have we're about halfway through the interview, and I want to make sure to tell this story of what happened in New Mexico out by Lingo, which is southwest of
Mhm.
Portales, about 40 miles, about 5 miles, 4 or 5 miles from the state line, headed towards Morton.
More.
So, what brought about for the Buffalo Soldiers to be in that area?
Okay, uh, according to this book here, and according to Carson research, the, there was a uprising, supposed to be an Indian uprising in Fort Sumner, and the buffalo, there was a buffalo hunters.
Hmm.
They was out killing buffaloes, and one of the Native American killed a hunter. So because of that, then those days, if you say there's a uprising with Indians, then you got a situation that the military had to come in.
Okay.
So, and since the Native American broke away from the reservation to do what they have to do, loot or whatever they did, uh,
Survival.
so and that means they brought in the fort over in Lubbock, Fort Conchas area, was contacted that we got an uprising in Lingo on the Llano. So Captain Nolan jumps up and take his 40-some men to the Llano, come out of Conchas, Hockley County, all the way through Martin,
Hmm.
Texas, and Roger in that area, drew and looking for these uh, renegade renegades, what they call them. And there was a scout named Senor Jose Tafur. And Mr. Tafur, who was a Kit Carson type person, he worked both sides of the fence. He knew where the Indians were, and he knew that the military would pay him to lead them to him, but also he was friends with the chief, with the leader, and the chief. Ironically, the name was uh, he. They gave him the name Chief Niggenhill, and so he was talking to him. Don't frown on that. This is where history is,
Okay.
and so so they was it was just about, let's say, 10 or 15 renegades running, and Tafur knew that, but he was getting big bucks to take the troops. So they go out looking for these, and every time that they get close to the Native American, they would go a little bit further. Then you can see dust, and so they went up, and you can just start putting A and B together and see how it got to C. So the Buffalo Soldiers were, first of all, their captain made a tactical mistake. He thought he can just run out there and catch a bunch of renegades and come right back in. Well, the Llano is very unique.
I
and there's
was
no trees.
I went out there a couple of
Right.
a few weeks ago, and I took the pictures. It's just a big sand hill.
It's a big sandhill.
Mhm.
It's, the mount that they end up getting to, all this area from Lubbock to Clovis, I would just say, wasn't nothing but grass.
Mhm.
It's like a sea of it's an ocean
Right.
of grass, and so they had no marks, no nothing. They just chasing around, basically going in circles looking for something that
Just a
didn't.
just a wild goose chase.
Yeah, it was basically what it was, and so it became a point where they was out there 86 hours without any water, and then,
Heat of the summer,
yeah, in July. That's
and
pretty.
no water and probably very little supplies.
Right, they'd had because they didn't prepare. Because they, like I said, they rushed out
Mhm.
because they thought it was gonna just be a little old go pick up and bring back
Right.
in. But then what really how it became a tragedy is that they ended up being on top of this little 50-foot hill, which we call Buffalo Soldier Hill, just the highest point of
Mhm.
that where they could cool down. And the sad thing about it, they was only about 300 yards from water, because there's water out there, but they didn't know
But
that.
they didn't know that.
No, it's water right there.
Everything looks the same, just
Earth They didn't know the water was there, but it was there. And then 4 of the guys in this march went back to the fort. Now this is where the sadness started. The 4 guys go back to the troopers go back to the fort. When they come in, the commander asked, "Well, where are the rest of the people?" Then these 4 men started lying, and they said, "Well, they all died and they got ambushed and there's a massacre and we just kind of we had to get away and try to get back to survive." Well, a week later, here come the remaining troops in that supposed to have been massacred, and by that time it hit the newspaper all the way back east. Tragedy
oh,
in Lingo. Buffalo Soldiers, and looking for anything
to pin that
to
on.
pin on the Buffalo Soldiers negative. So to get back to New York City, tragedy in New Mexico, Buffalo Soldiers
Mm.
ambushed by uh, Native Americans. Well, the ambush, they're about 500 miles away from the massacre of Ambush that was over near Gloriata area,
Right.
where and it had nothing to do with
Yeah.
Roosevelt County, but it happened at the same time.
Well, Oscar, we're down to like 3 minutes on
Okay.
this. I know it goes by way too quick. Four people died,
Mhm.
and so a big part of what you wanted to do was commemorate and have this Buffalo Soldier Hill renamed with something respectful and
Yeah,
commemorate.
yeah. The whole idea of I don't care about the history, how the name came about, but I do care about the future, and that I don't feel like it's really right to drop a name
Mhm.
on a person because you misunderstood or you think this is right thing to do. The word nigger is not very good, and it's a word that even I see young black men and women go around, Nigger this, nigger that." I get upset, but they don't understand the history of the word nigger, and if they read the history book, then they wouldn't want that.
The connotation of
Of what it means.
right.
And Buffalo Soldiers, uh, they fought for this country, and they dug ditches for this country. They plant trees and everything, but they have more. We should respect our military.
It and so your whole goal in helping to get this renamed and a marker put there
It's for the future.
is for the future and for people to respect and realize the history of what the
Yeah,
Black Cavalry did for our
yeah,
country.
that's true. And there's so many books out on the voices of the Buffalo Soldier, and Hollywood glorified, and they justify, anything that sell a book or a movie, they will make it something. For example, and I know you got a short time, but I met a guy on a train Christmas coming back from Washington, D.C., where I went to visit my sister in Maryland, and, this gentleman sitting next to me, and we got to talking like we're talking here,
Mhm.
and I mentioned this, Buffalo Soldier Hill, and he said, "Buffalo Soldier Hill." Anyway, this gentleman, he's a playwright, and his friend lives in New York City, and they write plays, one-act plays. As we speak, he's writing a play about Buffalo Soldier Hill.
So
And
to put this history down,
yeah,
oh, this is awesome.
right.
Oscar, this went by way too quick, but the books that you've referenced, there's a lot of information, and thank you for coming in today and sharing what
Uh,
you have. I appreciate it
Appreciate it.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Look forward to carrying on another time.
Okay.
And for all of you watching today, thank you, and we will see you next time. Cheers.